You have a cow. You do not want the cow. What you want is a roof. Your roof leaks, winter is coming, and there is a man 3 fields over who knows how to thatch. So you walk the cow over and you make him an offer. And he says no, not because your cow is bad. The cow is fine. He says no because he already has a cow, and what he actually needs is a new set of tools. So now you have a problem that is not about cows and not about roofs. Your problem is that you are holding one thing, he is holding another thing, and the universe has not arranged for those 2 things to line up. Economists have a name for this. They call it the double coincidence of wants. For any trade to happen, I must have exactly what you want, and you must have exactly what I want. You cannot cut a third of a cow off and hand it over. The cow does not survive being divided. The cow does not survive being stored for 2 years. The cow eats grass every single day whether or not you ever manage to trade it. And if it gets sick, your entire savings account dies in a field. So how do you get from that, a man stuck in a field holding an animal nobody wants, to a world where you can tap a slab of glass and instantly move value to a stranger on the other side of the planet? The answer is stranger than the story you were probably told in school. Because the first money was not gold. It was not silver. It was not shiny at all. The first money was a debt, and someone wrote it down. Let's start by killing the version of this story you already know. You have probably heard it. Once upon a time, people bartered. Barter was clumsy the cow problem, so eventually somebody invented coins. Coins turned into paper. Paper turned into cards. Clean, tidy, logical. That story comes from Adam Smith, who laid it out in The Wealth of Nations in 1776. It has been repeated in economics textbooks for nearly 250 years. There is a problem with it. Anthropologists have been looking for that barter economy for over a century. They have never found one. Caroline Humphrey of Cambridge put it bluntly in 1985. The anthropologist David Graeber made the same case at length in his book, Debt, the First 5,000 Years. What societies without money actually do is different, and honestly more interesting. They run on credit and obligation. You give your neighbor a side of meat. Nobody writes anything down. Nobody hands over a token. It is simply understood by everyone in a small community where everyone knows everyone that your neighbor now owes you. That invisible line of obligation is the real ancestor of money, not a coin, a memory of who owes what. Pure barter awkward haggling over a cow mostly shows up in one specific situation. When strangers meet who have no shared social ties and no expectation of ever seeing each other again, or when a monetary system collapses and people fall back on trading goods directly, which is exactly what happened in parts of the former Soviet Union in the 1990s. So barter did not come before money. In a lot of cases, barter came after it, which reframes the entire question. We are not asking how humans invented a shiny object. We are asking how humans invented a way to keep track of obligations between people who do not trust each other. Around 3,400 to 3,000 BCE, in the city-states of Sumer in southern Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, something happened that changed everything downstream of it. Cities got too big for memory. In a village of 40 people, the obligation system works. Everyone knows who owes what. But in a temple complex administering thousands of people, thousands of sheep, and thousands of measures of barley across a season, the human brain simply cannot hold the ledger, so they put it outside their heads. The French-American archaeologist Denise Schmont-Besserat spent decades cataloging small clay tokens found across the Near East. Cones, spheres, discs, ovoids, some dating back to around 8,000 BCE. Her argument is that these tokens were counters. One shape stood for one measure of grain, another stood for one animal. Then came the step that matters. Tokens for a transaction were sealed inside a hollow clay ball, so nobody could tamper with the count. But once it was sealed, you could not see what was inside without breaking it. So scribes began pressing the tokens into the outside of the ball before sealing it, leaving an impression of the contents on the surface. And at some point, somebody noticed the obvious thing. If the marks on the outside tell you everything, you do not need the tokens on the inside. You do not need the ball at all. You just need a flat tablet with the marks. That is cuneiform. That is the origin of writing. Sit with that for a second, because it is one of the genuinely shocking facts in human history. Writing was not invented for poetry, or law, or scripture, or love letters. The earliest tablets from Uruk are not stories. They are receipts, inventories, records of who delivered how much barley to which temple. Humanity learned to write because we needed to do bookkeeping, and on those tablets you find the first real unit of account. The Sumerians used a standardized weight of silver, called the shekel, roughly 8 grams, and it was defined against barley. But almost nobody was carrying silver around. The silver was a measuring stick. Debts were recorded in shekels and settled in whatever was available: grain, labor, livestock, oil. The Code of Hammurabi, carved in Babylon around 1750 B, is full of this. It sets prices in silver. It caps interest rates on grain loans and silver loans. It specifies penalties in silver. Money existed as a number in a ledger for well over 1,000 years before it existed as a coin in a pocket. Meanwhile, all over the world, people were converging on a different solution. Physical objects that everyone agreed had value. Cowrie shells, small glossy shells from the Indian Ocean, used as currency across Africa, South Asia, and China for thousands of years. In China, cowries were in use by the Shang dynasty over 3,000 years ago, and the influence stuck so hard that the Chinese character for shell still sits inside the characters for buying, selling, wealth, and trade to this day. Look at why the cowrie worked. Because these are the properties every successful money has needed since. It is durable. It does not rot like your cow. It is portable. You can carry a fortune in a bag. It is divisible. 100 small units instead of one indivisible animal. It is recognizable, hard to confuse with anything else. And critically, it is hard to fake. You cannot manufacture a cowrie shell. You have to go and get one from an ocean. That last property scarcity you cannot cheat is the whole game. And when it breaks, the money breaks with it. When European traders began shipping cowries into West Africa by the ton, the shells flooded the market and their value collapsed. Money that becomes easy to obtain stops being money. And then there is the most extreme example on Earth, the island of Yap in Micronesia. The Yapes used rye, vast carved limestone discs, some over 3 meters across, weighing several tons. The limestone did not exist on Yap. It had to be quarried on Palau, hundreds of kilometers away, and hauled back across open ocean on canoes and rafts. People died doing it. The stones were so heavy that they largely did not move when ownership changed. A stone would sit exactly where it sat, and the island would simply know that it now belonged to someone else. And there is a story recorded by the anthropologist William Henry Furness III in 1910 of a stone that sank on the voyage home. Everyone agreed it existed. Everyone agreed who owned it. Its value was undiminished by the fact that no living person would ever see it again. The economist Milton Friedman later wrote about Yap for exactly this reason. A giant rock at the bottom of the sea, functioning perfectly as wealth, is not a quirky footnote. It is the clearest demonstration of what money has always actually been. A shared agreement, held in the heads of a group of people. The object is the reminder. The agreement is the money. So if ledgers and shells already worked, what were coins for? Around 600 BC, in the kingdom of Lydia, Western Turkey, under kings including Aliats and later his son Croesus, someone solved a problem that had bothered every trader for 2,000 years. Precious metal was already used for large payments, but every single transaction required a test. How pure is this? How much does it weigh? Traders carried scales. They carried touchstones. Every deal began with an argument about the metal before it could even become an argument about the price. Lydia had a natural supply of electrum, an alloy of gold and silver, washing down from the mountains through the Pactolus River, and Lydian metallurgists worked out how to refine electrum into separated, consistent gold and silver. Then came the innovation. They cut the metal into standardized lumps and struck each one with a stamp, a lion's head, the royal emblem. The stamp is not decoration. The stamp is a sentence. It says, "The king of Lydia guarantees this weight and this purity, and if it is false, the king is the liar." That is the invention. Not metal money was ancient. The invention is a state putting its reputation onto a small object, so that two strangers can transact instantly, without a scale, and without trusting each other. Some of the earliest of these coins were excavated from the foundation deposit of the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus. Once it existed, it spread with almost no resistance. The Greek city-states adopted coinage rapidly. Athens minted the silver tetradrachm, the owl, from silver mined at Laurion, and it became something no money had ever been before, an international currency, accepted far beyond the borders of the state that issued it. Rome industrialized it. The denarius circulated from Britain to Syria, paying soldiers who then spent it in local markets, dragging an entire empire into a single cash economy. And China arrived at coinage independently, in its own idiom. Bronze cast into miniature spades and knives during the Zhou period, mimicking the very tools they had replaced. Then standardization under Qin Shi Huang, around 221 BC, into the round coin with a square hole. And that square hole is a piece of quiet genius. Thread a cord through 1,000 of them, and you can carry your money as a string. Coins, fixed trust. But coins created a new problem. Coins are heavy. A merchant moving serious value across a country is now moving a physical weight that bandits can see, lift, and take. China solved it first. Under the Tang dynasty, merchants used a system nicknamed flying cash. You deposited coins with an agent in one city and collected a certificate that could be redeemed in another. Then, in Sichuan during the Song dynasty, in the early 11th century, private merchants in Chengdu began issuing printed notes called jiaozi, backed by deposits of iron coin. The government took the system over around 1024 and issued the world's first state-backed paper currency. When Marco Polo described this to Europeans in the late 13th century, they found it difficult to believe, a con making men rich with printed mulberry bark. And China also ran the world's first great lesson in what goes wrong. Paper is cheap to produce. Coins are limited by how much metal you can dig out of the ground. Paper is limited only by restraint. Successive Chinese governments printed to cover deficits and wars, and the notes lost value. By the Ming dynasty, the paper experiment had been largely abandoned in favor of silver. Europe reached the same destination by a different road. The promissory note. Medieval bankers the Knights Templar for pilgrims, and later the great Italian houses like the Medici in 15th century Florence developed bills of exchange, partly to move value across dangerous roads, and partly to work around church prohibitions on lending at interest. Sweden's Stockholm's Banco issued Europe's first true banknotes in 1661. The Bank of England was founded in 1694 to fund a war, and its notes were promises. Pay the bearer on demand. That phrase is still printed on British banknotes today. It is a fossil. It is the ghost of a time when the paper was a claim on metal sitting in a vault. For most of the modern era, that claim was real, under the classical gold standard and later under the Bretton Woods system agreed in 1944. Currencies were pegged to the dollar, and the dollar was convertible to gold at $35 an ounce. Then, on the 15th of August, 1971, President Richard Nixon went on television and suspended the convertibility of the dollar into gold. It was announced as temporary. It was not temporary. Since then, essentially every currency on Earth has been fiat, from the Latin, for let it be done. A modern banknote is not a claim on anything in a vault. Its value rests on the stability of the issuing government, the fact that taxes must be paid in it, and the collective agreement of everyone who accepts it, which is to say, we ended up back on Yap. The stone at the bottom of the sea and the number in your banking app are the same kind of object. Neither is intrinsically valuable. Both work because a large group of people agree that they work. And the newest chapter takes that logic to its conclusion. In 2008, a paper appeared under the name Satoshi Nakamoto, proposing a currency with no state, no bank, and no vault. Value tracked purely by a shared distributed ledger, a public record of who owes what, maintained by a community too large to hold it in memory, which is almost exactly what the Sumerians were doing with wet clay 5,000 years ago. So, how did humans invent money? We did not find it. We did not dig it out of the ground. We invented it the same way we invented the boat, by hitting a wall that our bodies could not get past and building an abstraction to climb over it. The wall was other people. Specifically, it was the impossibility of remembering across a large enough group of strangers who had done what for whom. Every stage of this story is the same idea wearing a new costume. The clay token, the cuneiform tablet, the cowrie shell, the stone in the water, the lion stamped into electrum, the mulberry bark note, the number on the screen. Not one of them has value. Every one of them is a message, and the message has never changed. I trust that this will be honored. You are still holding a cow in a field. We just got extraordinarily good at pretending that we are not.